who went through a puberty. February did its name proud because it was definitely romance month. TikTok made me read this book and I regret it. 21. Over. Hello lovely bookworms, I'm Esmay from Paradise of Pages on Instagram and also on Twitter, and welcome to my February wrap-up. I said last month that I wanted to do monthly wrap-ups again, and I was trying to read enough to make sure that I have a proper wrap-up. I think I did my best this month because... Hello Luna. Hello? You want to say hi? What was I? So I think I actually did my best this month because I read a total of 21 books. 21. I'm proud of myself, to say the least. I'm very, very proud of myself. 21 books. I did well. That said though, a grand total of 2 of those books are physical books. So that said, let's just start with my nice graphs. I have actually added a couple of pie charts. I can't remember from the top of my head which ones, but I have added a couple. Let me pull up my spreadsheet because that makes my life entirely more, I wanted to say more difficult, but it makes my life entirely easy. Entirely more easy. Alright, so let's just start with the formatting first because I've already talked about this. I have read a total of, hey, it's 20 books actually. Not 21, it's 20. Sorry, I lied. 20 books, not 21. 20 books. And a total of 18 of those were ebooks and a total of 2 were physical books. Then speaking of rereads, 19 were new and 1 of them was a reread. We'll get to that as we go. Then as for series, it's actually very nicely balanced out. I have 10 standalones and I have 10 that were part of a series. With some of these it was a little bit iffy due to the fact that some of them are technically part of a series, but the next book is about a different character, if that makes sense. We'll get to that as we go. Can you hear that? Those are the cats. Then for age category, 2 of those were young adult. 18 of those were adult. And then let's get into a little bit more of the interesting ones. So genre, for genre I have 17 romance books. February did its name proud because it was definitely romance month. And I have 2 fantasy and 1 crime book. As for pages, we're gonna have to zoom in for that one because it's a little bit more interesting. Can I even... You can't even see the entire diagram. That is awesome. Well, we'll try. I have 4 that are between 300 and 350. I have 2 that are under 100. Then I have 3 that are between 250 and 300. I have 1 that's between 450 and 500. I have 3 that are between 400 and 450. I have 2 that are between 100 and 150. And then I have... Why won't I... Why am I not able to see the entire diagram? Maybe if I make it big. Oh, it happens. It helps if I make it bigger. Okay, so I then have 3 that are between 250 pages, 200 and 250 pages, and 2 that are between 150 and 200 pages. So that are all of my, those are all of my pages. Very interesting, if I may say so myself. Very, very range of books this month. Speaking of stars, we have 13 3-star books, so pretty average, pretty good. I have 3 that are 2-star, kind of sad about that. I have 1 5-star book, and I have 3 4-star books. So those are all of the graphs, I think. I think those are the ones that I will be running with from this month onwards, but we shall see, we shall see. And I'm gonna go through them once again in order of when I read them. So yeah, let's just dive right into book number 1. The first book I have read was by Catherine Walsh, and that is The Rebound. So this follows a girl who basically loses her job, and in the sort of process of that also loses her fiance. She wasn't incredibly keen on him anyway, because it was more of the we are together for convenience and it is asked of us that we get married, so we should. And so she basically goes to visit her sister for a short period of time, which then sort of turns into we'll see, and there she meets basically her childhood friend who she hasn't seen in years, who went through a puberty. I think that's the nicest way to put it. He went through puberty. It was a very interesting book. I had a lot of fun reading this. I feel like this was one of those books that you really need, that was just fun and cozy. I think it was technically speaking around the Christmas time, from what I remember. At least it felt like that for me. Though there is an Easter hunt in there, so I'm not sure. But it gave me one of those cute and cozy Christmassy vibes. So if you were to read this around that period, it definitely makes sense. It was very, very cozy. I actually gave this one 3 stars. It came out 3 stars in Copile, and this was 334 pages. So, first time standalone read. It was an ebook, and it was an adult book. I will not be mentioning this for every single book because I feel like it will probably get tedious. I think I will just explain what the book is about and whether I've enjoyed it or not. Next up is a book that I've actually carried over. Who's that? That's not for me. Give me a minute, I'll be back. Okay, so we are back. Book number 2 is a book that I've carried over from the previous month. This is one of my physical books. It is also the only, I think the only fantasy book on here. No, it's one of 2. Oh, there's the other one. It's one of the 2 fantasy books, and that is Last Legacy by Adriana Young. It is set in the world of Fable, and for those of you who don't know Fable is a duology that comes before this one. So if you want to read this book, I would definitely tell you to read those first because it will have spoilers for that series, just so you're clear. Fable is about a girl who hunts for gems and is lost, basically gets stuck on this island and wants to get off, but that's not what this one is about. This one actually follows Bryn, who is family to one of the characters in Fable, and it follows her family story. So she actually has to go to Bastion. I think that's what the city is called. Yeah, Bastion. And there she has to go to help her family get one of these merchant rings because their family has been in sort of rough waters and a little bit less than pristine standing, if that makes sense. And so she is there to help them get this merchant ring and get into sort of the positives of society. To become a merchant, you don't really want the criminal sort of tag put on you. So that's this story. It was quite fun. I actually listened to quite a bit of the audiobook for this one, and it was really enjoyable. I really enjoyed it. I do have to say that when I put it into Cobile, it was one of those average reads. This one was 3 stars for me. I did enjoy reading it, but it's not a book that really stands out. I think Fable and Namesake are a lot better than The Last Legacy. Was it enjoyable though? 100%. I can definitely recommend it. It's a quick book as well. It's quite thin. It's a standalone story, though I am curious to see how sort of the ending, like what would happen after the ending, if that makes sense. But it's a very interesting book, so that's book number 2. Book number 4 and book number 5 I'm gonna sort of pin together because they're part of the series but follow 2 different characters, and those are both by Dana Isali, and those are Games We Play and Secrets We Hunt. I hope I can actually get both on here. If not, you'll see either of. So the first one basically follows a famous gamer and a journalist, and this journalist goes to this famous gamer's house to basically get into an interview with him, and it's a very spicy book. Let me just say that. It's quite a short book, but quite a spicy book, and that was exactly what I needed in the month of February because I read a lot of them, mind you. It was a spicy month, very spicy month, but that's okay. And I actually was surprised by how much plot was in this first book, that in sort of the small amount of time, because it was a book that is 90 pages long and it had quite a lot of plot, which I was surprised by and did really enjoy, hence why I picked up the second one. So the second one actually follows one of our main protagonist's friends, like the guy, like the gamer in book 1. One of his best friends is sort of the lead in book number 2, and I can't really tell you that much about book number 2 because it would spoil book number 1, hence why it is part of a series. But I gave both of these 3 stars. They were very interesting. I loved the fact there was so much plot in between all of the spice, if that makes sense. So those were book 4, 4, and 5. Next up, I read a book that I completely read due to the fact that TikTok exists. TikTok made me read this book, and I regret it. Very much so. I very much regret it. I think there's a cat here. Basically, the reason why is there is this one line at the very beginning of this book that basically says, like, there's this guy chained to a boat and there's dripping blood from his jaw or something. It was the way that they posed this quote made me interested. However, other than that, there was nothing that I liked about this book. It had toxic masculinity. There was a weird sort of subplot. All male characters apparently were not great, apart from the love interest, because of course he does a full 180 where he goes from bad boy to whatever, good guy. I don't know. It was just not my thing. It was entirely too long because it's, as I'm looking at it now, it's 297 pages, and it was 297 pages of my life wasted. This is not for me. This was not a book for me. It's probably a good book for someone. Not for Esmay though. No. So let's just continue on to the next one. Speaking of good books for Esmay, this is the one reread I had in the month, and this is the one book that I gave 5 stars, and it shouldn't be a surprise because if you followed the live show for this, it's The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. This is, I've talked about this book so often at this point. It's one of the books that got me into romance books, and I loved going into it again. I know that it has flaws and I know that it's not perfect, but this is the book for Esmay. I just love this guy so much. It was also a birthday gift from Sasha, I think, and Sasha, I think Sasha DNF'd it, or she read through it and hated it. It's either or. I think Steph DNF'd it and Sasha actually pushed her way through, but she wished she hadn't. But that's okay, because this is my baby. We're good. We're good. This is my baby, so we're good. Anyway, this follows a woman who has to go to her sister's wedding, and her co-worker Erin goes with her. They definitely have this hate thing going on, and that's sort of the main premise of the book. I've talked about this so often that I feel like I don't have to anymore. I loved it. I loved it again. I will reread this to the ends of the earth. So this was my 5 star. This was my reread, and I loved it. It was perfect for February. So love you very much. Those are also all of my physical books down. So editing Esmay will hate me for this, but that's okay. That's okay. Life decisions, life choices. Next. So I then actually had an arc, and I was a bit confused by this one because I feel like it went through a name change, and I'm 100% certain it went through a name change. The book I'm talking about is The Valkyrie's Daughter by Tiana Warner, and I think this was literally called The Helheim Princess because that's the title of the arc that I had. This is a 400-page book. I gave it 3 stars. I have to say that it was entirely forgettable. It was interesting. It had to do with sort of this Viking, Norse gods kind of thing, and I feel like I'm not even explaining this correctly, but it was one of those typical young adult fantasy books that I know a young, new fantasy reader would love. I personally expect a bit more from my fantasy books, at least. Lately, I've been getting a lot more into adult fantasy and just a bit more, I need a bit more oomph, if that makes sense. So it was not bad. It was definitely a good book, and it was definitely a book that I would have been obsessed with were I younger. As it stands, I'm 25, and I've evolved. I've just grown out of these types of books, and I don't think I will continue on with this series, but it was an interesting book, and thank you so much to NetGalley for providing a copy. Moving on, I have a book that was, I think, very popular last year, and that is, spoiler alert, by Olivia Dade. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is about a woman who is obsessed with a TV show, I think very similar to Game of Thrones, but sort of in a Troy kind of setting. So it has these gods, I think. Not a lot is known about the TV show. And we follow our main protagonist, I want to say April, I'm not sure, and Marcus. I do know that his name is Marcus. I think it's April and Marcus. And she is a plus-sized woman who finally has the courage to actually post a video on Twitter of her cosplay of a character in this TV show, and she basically gets a lot of positives, but as it is with fat phobia, also a lot of negative thoughts. I feel like in that aspect it was very true to how reality is, and it made me feel very uncomfortable. Like, I'm not a size small woman, definitely not, so it hit quite close to home, but that's okay. And she's actually already been in contact with the main character, or the main lead in this TV show, and that's Marcus. Marcus is on this fanfiction page, which is also where April writes her fanfiction, and they already meet, and then basically he decides to invite her out to dinner, not knowing that it was his friend from this fanfiction page, and that's basically where the story starts. I think it was a very interesting story. I love how sort of pro-woman it is, and pro be who you want to be and be okay. What I did not like about this is that they pushed the fat phobia to such an extent where everyone either didn't care, or they thought it was it was close to like murdering kids. Sort of, they were so unhappy with the fact that she was fat that it was almost like it was a crime, and it was a little bit overdone. Maybe that's because I've not found people to be like this, but it was a little bit much. I think I still gave it 4 stars, or did I give it 3? I gave it 4 stars. It was really enjoyable, and I'm really interested in reading the sequel, All the Feels. So yeah, I can definitely recommend it if you're looking for a different type of romance. Moving on to another book that I got through NetGalley, which I thought was an ARC but is not, but still read, and that is The Dying Game by Beverly Barton. This is basically about a woman who finds herself caught up in a game with a murderer, and basically this game is, you basically have to beat this game, otherwise you'll get killed. It was a very interesting concept, but it was one of those very unsatisfying crimes where you kind of figure out a lot of things, and then there's a lot of things you could not have figured out because there were no clues. I gave it 3 stars because I still enjoyed the concept of it. It was still a really interesting book, but I don't think it's as good as some of the other crime books that I've read, so it's definitely not a 4 star. Copal basically told me that it was a low 3 star, I think, so that's about right. It's like an average book. Alright, then I basically got into quite a couple of arcs, and the first one is To Get to the Other Side by Kelly Olert. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is basically about a girl who saves a goose from the middle of the road, and the apartment that she's currently living in does not accept any animals, so she has to move, and then our male character's sister actually rents out one of his rooms in his house. And so our goose girl actually applies to this, and he decides, you know what, it's fine, and that's where the story starts. It was one of those romances that was very average. It was basically like a dime a dozen. I didn't really care about the characters at all. It was enjoyable, it was fun, the twist with the goose was fine, and I gave it 3 stars. Not that memorable. Then, speaking of a romance I did really enjoy, that is A Little More Action with double O by Sarah L. Hudson. So what this is about, it's basically following a woman who is hired by this big company, a big sort of store company called More, because that's the surname of our main character, who is currently taking over the store, the More store, to make sure that everything is okay. So we have 2 main protagonists and our female marketing specialist who goes in. I loved the way that this book was written. It was very clear cut, like it literally, I don't know, it was just very clear and not that flowery, and that was exactly what I wanted from this book. I love the way that things were resolved and just the way that this relationship built. It was just a lot of fun. I cackled a lot when reading this book. It was also very quick, and I gave this 4 stars. It was very, very enjoyable, and I loved it. It was amazing. So yeah, I enjoyed it so much. So next up we have The Billionaire Blooper by Lolita Thorne, and this is about a woman who gets invited by her friend to come to this resort island. This friend actually works on this resort, and they do this all the time, where if someone sort of cancels, they can invite friends. The owner does not know this, who is the billionaire in question, and when this woman actually runs into this billionaire, he thinks that she is a spice worker, like a, how do you even call that, you know, in nice words, you know what I mean. It's very funny, but it's also like it's a bit over the top at the end, especially like the you know, the ending is a little bit over the top. I did enjoy it. It was quite quick. I gave it 3 stars. It was fun, but nothing spectacular. Alright, then I read A Cross Country Christmas by Courtney Walsh. Here's me in February reading a Christmas book. I had a blast. It was so fun. So this is about a woman who actually has to go to her brother for Christmas. And in order to get to her brother, she has to either fly or go by car. She is very afraid of flying. So her best friend's brother, no, her brother's best friend, actually tells her, you know what, you can drive with me. But she doesn't want that because she does not like this guy. But she does it anyway, and so they literally go on this cross-country Christmas road trip, and it was so much fun. I love the banter between these two characters, and they were so conflicted from time to time, and the way that they talk to each other was amazing, and I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I'm gonna basically just log together 5 books, and they're all by Nikki St. Crow. We have Hot Vampire Next Door season 1 and 2, and then we have her Ruthless Demon King, Sinful Demon King, Vengeful Demon King trilogy. The first one, Hot Vampire Next Door, is basically one of those sort of Wattpad kind of season-y things that she's published. I didn't know that, but I was interested in it. It's basically about a town where you have all kinds of paranormal beings, and our main protagonist basically should be wrapped up in one vampire family, but then gets wrapped up in the vampire next door, who is apparently very hot. It was very, very enjoyable. I gave it 3 stars, both of them, and I will read the season 3 when it gets here. It's horrible, but I did anyway. So then we have the Ruthless Demon King trilogy by the same author. These are definitely novels, and this is about a woman who lives in a world where a demon king has entered, and he's basically undefeatable. But then one day she actually comes across him, and she's able to withstand his powers, and he basically asks her to kneel, and she's like, yeah, hell no, that's not happening. I am not kneeling to no man. And so she doesn't, and then he basically goes on this manhunt to try and find her. It was hilarious, it was funny. I was actually quite romantic, and a lot of interesting plot as well. If it would have been like a little bit more of an established book, like a little bit bigger and a little bit more backstory and, you know, all that, it would have been a really, really solid fantasy romance. For now, it was like a fantasy romance that was just fun. So I gave, I think, all of these 3 stars. Yeah, I did. Then I have Savage Game by Karen Napa. This was something I don't really like in spice books is when they are third person. This was third person, and it's about a woman who's married to this very abusive husband, and then she gets in a game actually won by another guy, and she has to go to be his personal assistant in everything, basically. It was such a weird book. I don't know why I finished it. Maybe because it was a quick read. I gave it 2 stars. I really didn't like it. So yeah, there's that. I'm not gonna... Next. Final book. The final book that I read was Brutal Air by Eden O'Neill. This was basically a college story. So our main protagonist used to be... I think the main protagonist's mother used to be a maid at this heir's house. I think his name was... I don't remember his name. That's how much I remember of these books, apparently. I do remember the plot. And something happened in the past that basically made her mother lose her job. So when she, years later, runs into him again, she's not that happy about that. But in an unfortunate series of events, there is a suicide in here in the beginning, so trigger warning for that. They're sort of combined together because of the fact they've witnessed this. And it's called Brutal Air, so he's not necessarily the nicest guy. But I did really enjoy the plot behind this. I did enjoy reading it quite a ton. I think I gave it 3 stars. Yeah, I did. I gave it 3 stars. It was quite a fun book, and if you're looking for spies, this is definitely the place to be. These are a little bit less, it's just smut and nothing else. These actually have a plot, which is nice. And yeah, that's the final book of the month. So those are all of the 20 books that I've read this month. I am blown away. This guy was really my best friend. This guy was my best friend this month. I read so much on my e-reader and I love this guy. So if you're wondering what I think of my e-reader, there you have it, little update. 20 books is insane. I know that some of them are quite short, so I feel like that balances it out a bit, but I definitely had a really good reading month. I hope that in this month I can read a bit more, let me just call them normal books. I kind of want to step away from the smut. I don't know, February was that month, I suppose. It's fine. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed another wrap up. I feel like it's quite a long one because there are so many books. I did not expect to read that much in February, especially because we had, I think, 29 days? 28 or 29 days, and I read 20 books. That's almost a book a day. I'm impressed by myself. Anyway, March is definitely not going that well. So I hope that you have enjoyed the statistics once again. I cannot pronounce that word to save my life. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to our channel and press that little bell icon so you get post notifications every single time that we post. And I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye!